Hello, and welcome to Handled Ish Productivity for the Imperfect, a weekly podcast for those who want to elevate their productivity but are not looking for perfection. I'm your host, Betsy Hayes, and I'm really happy you're here. This is episode 84, Making Big or Make Big Transitions Easier. So it's back to school time when I'm recording this, and that in and of itself is a huge transition for all families and humans that have anything to do with back to school, whether you are an educator or a support or staff for educators or admin or a parent or a child or a college student. The back to school time is obviously a big transition. So we could be talking about that, particularly, if you're starting a new thing, right? A new school, I guess a new school from an education standpoint. But this could also be, big transitions like, having an empty nest, right? Maybe it's a combination of, your child is going to college and you now have an empty nest. And so a couple of big transitions. Or it could be a move, right? That's a huge transition anytime you move, even if you do it within the same city. It could also be a new job, right? So we're talking about big transitions. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm an educator. And so back to school always, reminds me of this. And also, I have several friends going through big transitions with either empty nests or retirement or, all of those types of things. And so I wanted to talk about it. So I was thinking about framing this in kind of three buckets. Okay. So you have a big transition coming up. One of the best ways to deal with anything, as you know, from my personal perspective and opinion, is to think about it ahead of time and plan and prepare. I think that usually that helps mitigate some of the whatever, right? Some of the yuckiness, some of the stress, some of the discomfort, all of those things can be often mitigated by preparation and planning. And so thinking about it in three buckets: allowing, adjusting, and building. So the allowing really, oh, I guess this is where I need to do my little disclosure. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychologist. I'm a human who loves to think, write, speak, read about all of this kind of stuff. Okay. And the information I'm sharing is primarily from my own experience and from the experience of people I know and some occasional articles. So, allow. So, allow is just giving yourself grace, right? And allowing yourself to really, as cliche as this might sound these days, which is wild because we never used to talk about feeling our feelings, but you really need to just feel your feelings and just honor and give yourself grace for whatever it is that you're feeling. And usually during a big transition, we have a myriad of feelings. There's often, a feeling of grief or loss for the thing that is no longer there or the life situation that is no longer there. And there's also tends to be excitement, right? Newness, gives us a level of excitement, of possibility, all that kind of stuff, clean slate, all those things that make us feel really good. And then, it could certainly be anything in between. You could just feel kind of meh, right? Kind of kind of uncertain, sort of floating, limbo, you know, untethered, right? When I became an empty nester, that was one of the things that I really felt was this whole untethered because I had been tethered in the best possible way to being, on the ground mom. And then, suddenly I was in a different, mom spot. So just really allow whatever it is that you're feeling to really feel it. Just when you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed with emotion, take a minute, do some grounding, deep breathing, grounding, standing really on 2 feet. A lot of people, we've talked about this before, like to go barefoot out in the grass and the dirt. It's very grounding. There's some good research that supports that. But I just really feel like just planting your feet solidly on the floor, whether you are standing or sitting, or again, lie down, just lie right on the floor, lie on the bed, whatever, couch, do some breathing and just, take a moment to just feel the feelings and don't try to stuff them. anywhere because we all know why now that stuffing our feelings is a really great way to keep them around, right? You might have heard that phrase, what we resist persists, which in my experience is definitely true. So allow, right? Just don't judge your feelings. Your feelings are your feelings, right? Feelings are, typically involuntary, right? We feel what we feel, how we respond to them is the voluntary part. So don't judge your feelings, don't get upset with yourself. Oh my gosh, why am I still sad about this? Because you're still sad about it. It just is what it is, right? And, then, we can respond to it in a little bit. But first, that whole allowing phase, I think, is really important. And a little asterisk on the allowing phase, be prepared to have very strong emotions at moments that you didn't expect because sometimes we don't know, right, what those trigger points are going to be. Sometimes we do, which, will lead us to the next bucket, which is this idea of adjusting. So, oftentimes with the big transition, we have things that we're not doing anymore, right? And sometimes those are traditions. Maybe you're having a new job, so you're not going to eat lunch all the time with your favorite coworkers. And you might be sad about that. Instead of just letting that go completely, maybe you can adjust. If you are still in the same city, maybe you can have lunch, a couple times a month, right? It's not going to be all the time, but you can probably make that happen and still share that connection. If you are not in the same city anymore, there's nothing wrong with, opening up a Zoom call and eating a sandwich at the same time over Zoom. That is certainly, obviously a little different than an in-person lunch, but you're still getting to maintain that connection. If your family, always did pizza on Fridays or, went to your favorite restaurant, Mexican restaurant, but your, child is in college, maybe, Venmo them some money to get pizza on a Friday, right? And, maybe again, you can, get pizza and, have your pizza party over Zoom or something. Or, again, if they're in the same town, maybe that can be, a couple times a month, you guys can adjust, maybe you do your pizza night on a different day, but you're still doing that same tradition, right? So the things that you regularly did that filled you with joy and you're real sad about losing, maybe there's some adjustments that can happen and you can still keep those things in your life in a different way, right? And then the third bucket is build. So when we have a big transition, it again, even if we're choosing it, even if it's inherently fabulous, right? Our kids, going to elementary school or junior high or high school or college, right? We can say objectively all of those things are great. Getting a new job, more than likely, right, is something that you're excited about. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have taken the job, right? Moving again, even there's refer to episode 28 if this is a transition that you didn't choose, because I have some additional tips on that. But for the most part, what we're talking about today is something that's inherently positive, but it still, comes with loss and feelings and a change in the way that you live your day-to-day life. And so, again, in addition to adjusting some of those things and keeping them in your life, I think this is a great opportunity to build new things in your life. And, with every stage of life, there are things that we can do, and there are things that we can't do, but would like to do. And when we have a transition time, I think it's, time to look at that bucket, right? What are the things that you have wanted to do, but couldn't because of, the phase of life that you were in? Maybe you really wanted to go to the gym in the morning, but your old job, you had to get there super early and that wasn't feasible. Or maybe you always wanted to, take up, I don't know, Tai Chi, pottery, whatever, writing, and because the kids were home and you were very focused on that and your work or family or whatever, you couldn't do that. Maybe it's time to explore that particular opportunity. So think about what is still on, the old bucket list, or want to do this, or something new that you're feeling really called and excited about doing. This is a great time to do this. Think about how you can slowly, right? You don't want to overwhelm yourself, because that is a little piece of caution, right? Sometimes we see a new transition or a big transition on the horizon and we stuff our time with all these things, that's not healthy either, right? Because then we're going to be overwhelmed and sad that we have a new phase in life. So, no, slowly, right, incorporating these kind of things, and think about it. We've talked about this a lot on the podcast with a really light touch and a attitude of experimentation, because just because you think you might want to take up pottery or writing a novel doesn't mean when you try it you will like it. And you can always pivot, right? So you are not marrying these ideas. You're just test driving them and seeing if they stick and you want to, fully incorporate them, at least for this time. Because that's the other thing we need to think about too. We can do things for a tiny, small, medium, large, or extra large amount of time, and it's all good. Okay. I think I mentioned that I thought that I would like to learn how to belly dance. So I took a class, I think it was last summer. And the first couple of classes, I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm terrible. But this is still really fun. This is unique. This is wild. It's kind of out of the box. I kind of like telling people that I was taking belly dancing lessons, made me kind of feel exotic, which is hilarious because if you know me in real life, that's probably not a word you would use to describe me. But after a while, I'm like, you know what? I don't even really like this. This is not fun. I'm not getting any better. I don't even know if I want to get any better. And yeah, so I quit. I was like, you know what? I just don't want to do belly dancing. And that is totally okay. And you can do those types of things too. You can also think about the time period where the transition happens. Again, the week after you move, the week after you start a new job, the week after your child goes to college or kindergarten or whatever, to give yourself all kinds of extra things that bring you joy. And this is where perhaps stuffing a lot of things into a period of time is not bad, right? Maybe it's a week, maybe it's a day, the week of you, the day of you. And I was talking to one of my really super good friends whose child is going to college, and we're talking about the week of her right afterwards, and it's going to be really fun. And I love that idea. And so at the moment of this transition is when emotions are typically really high, and so maybe you do stuff a whole day with things that bring you joy to sort of help not only mark the transition but mark the new phase of your life. Or a week, stuff it full of stuff that you love to do to, again, get you excited about the new phase in life. Because, most transitions have, both loss and gain. And so marking them and recognizing both of those things, I think, is really important to making the transition less stressful, less painful. Again, even if it's a good transition, we're still giving up things, right? And there's still things that aren't happening that used to happen. So what can you do to stuff it, full of things that, normally maybe it would be in a month or 6 weeks, let's just cram them all in a week and just really make sure that you have a great reason to get up in the morning. And, because you've got, a couple of things on the calendar and, in addition to your regular things that are really going to give you joy. So the building, I think, is the third bucket. So yeah. So I'd love to know how you have managed some big transitions in your life, and additional thoughts that you have, things that have gone well, things that you tried that maybe didn't work right. We learned from all of those. Happy to connect on this at Betsy Hays on all the social media, BetsyHays. My website, betsyahays.com. And yeah, until next time we are together, have the most amazing week, and please take care, because you are doing way better than you think you are. Trust me.